My brother's fiancé looked me dead in the eye at the rehearsal and said, "You don't fit the vibe, don't come tomorrow. No whisper, no shame, just a clean public cut." My brother didn't defend me. My parents stared at their shoes. I walked out of their dream wedding carrying the sting of every whispered laugh behind me. That night, I didn't beg or argue. I drove home, tore off the dress that still smelled of their flowers, and made one phone call that changed everything. Their big day never even began. Before I tell you the rest, tell me, where are you listening from, so I know I'm not alone. And when you've heard my story, tell me, what would you have done in my place? I grew up in a house where silence spoke louder than any apology. My mother, Sylvia, believed that peace was more important than truth, and my father, Richard, believed that silence was peace. That left me the problem solver, the steady one, to hold everything together. When something broke, I fixed it. When Aaron failed, I covered for him. It was never a question. It was my role. Aaron was the golden child, the one with the easy grin and the bad timing that everyone forgave. He could forget birthdays, crash cars, lose jobs, and somehow it was always just a phase. I was the planner, the spreadsheet in human form, the person who kept the lights on. My mother used to say it like a compliment, "Elena doesn't need anything." It took me 31 years to realize she meant Elena doesn't matter if she's not useful. When Aaron met Madeline, my family treated it like he'd won the lottery. She was polished, photogenic, the kind of woman who spoke in curated sentences and smiled only when someone was watching. From day one, she looked at me like I was an inconvenient footnote in her perfect story. Still, I told myself to be gracious. Maybe she'd warm up. Maybe this was my chance to finally be part of something instead of just paying for it. So when they got engaged, I offered to handle the wedding logistics as my gift. Not just the bills, though, yes, those too, but the planning itself. I booked the venue, met with florists, built timelines, managed invoices. It was what I did best. Numbers made sense. People didn't. Each payment came from my account, each contract under my name, each email signed E. Carter, because Madeline wanted things to look professional. I didn't question it. I wanted it to go smoothly for Aaron's sake. For months I told myself their small dismissals didn't matter. The way Madeline corrected me in front of vendors, the way my mother said, "Don't make this about you," whenever I tried to share an idea. I smiled through it all, reminding myself that family means compromise. Then came the rehearsal dinner. The Willow Estate glowed under thousands of string lights I'd approved, reflected perfectly on the lake I'd chosen. Guests laughed, champagne glasses clinked, and Madeline stood in the center of it all like a magazine cover come to life. I stood at the edge, checking vendor notes, invisible but useful, until she turned and cut me out with a single line. That moment didn't come from nowhere. It came from years of being the dependable background character in other people's stories. But that night, watching the lights shimmer over the lake, I made myself a quiet promise I'd never pay for my own erasure again. And if it meant burning down the picture-perfect world I'd built for them, so be it. The next morning, I woke up to a string of polite chaos in my inbox, messages from vendors confirming final details, timelines, menu adjustments, delivery times. Every subject line began with "Congratulations to the happy couple." It should have felt like satisfaction. Instead, it felt like salt in a wound I hadn't noticed was still bleeding. I went through the motions, confirming schedules, double-checking payments, forwarding contracts. My name sat at the bottom of every email like a ghost no one wanted to see. I told myself I was just finishing what I started. But when I called the venue to verify the head count, the coordinator hesitated. "Oh, Madeline already reached out," she said, her voice cautious. She wanted to update the main contact information for the event. Something in my chest went cold. "She what?" she said. "She's taking over and to remove you from all vendor communications." For a second, I couldn't even form words. My own name was being erased from something I built like whiteout over a contract. "Leave everything as is," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "If she calls again, tell her the account holder will be in touch." I hung up and just sat there listening to the hum of my office. The same room where I'd spent months crafting their perfect day spreadsheets, receipt schedules taped to the wall. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I took a sip anyway. Bitter. That was the taste of it all. I drove to my parents' house that afternoon hoping for some anchor, some sanity check. My mother barely looked up from her coffee when I told her what had happened. "Madeline's under a lot of stress," she said, waving her hand like she was brushing off dust. "You know how brides are. Can't you just let it go?" "Let it go," I said. "She uninvited me from a wedding I paid for." My father looked over the top of his newspaper. "You've always been independent, Elena. Let Aaron have his moment." There it was again, the script I'd heard my whole life. Aaron needs things. I can handle things. My role was to absorb the damage so he could stay golden. I drove home in silence, the kind that hums in your ears. On the passenger seat, my phone buzzed a text from Aaron. "Mads told me what happened. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." That was the moment it all clicked. This wasn't about a misunderstanding. It was coordination, a quiet, calculated removal. I pulled into my driveway and just sat there, watching the rain streak down the windshield. Every drop hit like punctuation on a sentence I didn't want to read. They wanted me gone, but they still wanted my money. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror, tired, humiliated, furious. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like fixing anything. I felt like watching it all fall apart. That night, I spread every wedding document across my dining table, the same table that had hosted Thanksgiving dinners and quiet mornings of bookkeeping. Now it looked like a war map. Each folder had a color tab, each contract a clause I knew by heart. I wasn't thinking about revenge yet. I was thinking about clarity, about how many times I'd let people cross my boundaries because it was easier, about how being the capable one had turned into a trap I'd built myself. As I sat there, the doorbell rang. Miles Donovan, my business partner, and the only person who'd seen this storm brewing, stepped inside still holding his takeaway coffee. "You look like someone auditing her own family," he said softly. "Funny," I replied. "That's exactly what this is." He skimmed through the folders, eyebrows lifting. "These are all under your name, every single one," I said. "Venue, florist, catering, photographer, even the insurance." "Then you still hold the cards," he said. "They just forgot you're the dealer." I didn't smile, but something shifted inside me. Miles stayed until midnight, walking me through every cancellation clause, every refund policy, every legal shield I'd quietly built without realizing how much protection it offered me. I wasn't the outsider. I was the infrastructure. When he left, I sat in the silence of my apartment, surrounded by proof that everything they celebrated depended on me. My phone buzzed with missed calls from Aaron, then from Madeline, then from my mother. I didn't pick up. Instead, I saved their messages, each one a record of how easily they expected me to fold. At 6:00 a.m., I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and began making calls. Not emotional ones, not angry ones, business ones. Calm, precise, professional. "This is Elena Carter, primary account holder for the Carter Grant event. I'm formally terminating our agreement effective immediately." Some vendors hesitated. Some didn't. Most were sympathetic once they realized who was actually footing the bill. By 9:00 a.m., the dominoes were falling. The Willow estate was off the schedule. The florist canceled delivery. The caterer rebooked another event. By noon, the wedding no longer existed, at least not in any way that could be salvaged. I leaned back in my chair, exhaustion mixing with something else I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Not triumph, not spite, just freedom from a role that had never fit. My phone lit up again, Aaron's name flashing on the screen. I didn't answer. The calls would keep coming. The panic would grow, and for once I wasn't going to stop it. The storm hit faster than I expected. By Saturday morning, the day of the wedding, my phone was already vibrating across the counter before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. Unknown numbers, voicemails, messages stacking one over another. I didn't answer a single one. Outside, the city was quiet. Light rain misted the glass of my apartment windows, soft and steady. For the first time in months, I wasn't rushing anywhere. I wasn't fixing anything. I just stood there barefoot on the tile, listening to the sound of my phone buzzing itself breathless. At 9:12 a.m., someone pounded on my door. I didn't have to check the peephole. I already knew. When I opened it, my family filled the doorway like a storm cloud. My mother's lipstick was smudged. My father's tie was loose and uneven. Aaron's face was pale beneath the frantic blush of stress. And behind him, Madeline, perfect curls, slightly frizzed from the rain mascara, bleeding just enough to ruin her perfection. "What did you do?" she demanded before I could speak. Her voice cracked on the word "you." I didn't answer. I stepped aside just enough for them to come in. They did, stomping past me like an intervention team. My apartment smelled like coffee and quiet defiance. "The vendors are refusing to show up," Aaron said, his voice breaking between anger and disbelief. "The venue's locked, the caterer isn't answering, and what the hell is going on, Elena?" I took my time setting my mug down. "They're not refusing," I said evenly. "They're following instructions." Madeline's jaw dropped. "You canceled our wedding." "Our wedding?" I echoed softly. "Funny. I thought you said I didn't belong there." Her eyes flashed. "You can't just— This is insane. We have 150 guests arriving in 2 hours." I met her gaze, calm as a still lake. "You have 150 guests and no wedding. That's what happens when you erase the person who paid for it." Aaron rubbed his forehead like he was trying to massage sense into the moment. "You're being petty." "No," I said. "I'm being done." Madeline's voice turned sharp, desperate. "You can't do this. You signed contracts." I walked to the table and tapped the thick binder sitting there, the same one I'd carried out of the rehearsal. "Yes, I signed them. Not you. Every contract, every payment, every receipt is under my name, and every single one included a cancellation clause. I didn't even lose money." My mother finally spoke, voice trembling between fury and pleading. "Elena, be reasonable. People have flown in from across the country. This is Aaron's wedding." I turned to her. "And yesterday when I said I was being pushed out of it, you told me to be the bigger person. This is me being the bigger person. I didn't show up to ruin anything. I just stopped funding my own humiliation." The room went quiet. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the windows like an impatient clock. Aaron finally looked at me, eyes red. "I never wanted this." "Didn't you?" I asked. "You watched it happen. You let her speak to me that way. Let Mom excuse it. Let Dad look away. You didn't want to stop it because it was easier to let me take it." He swallowed, hard guilt flickering across his face. Madeline reached for his arm, but he pulled slightly back, just enough for her to notice. "I thought you'd understand," Aaron said softly. "You always fix things. That's the problem," I said. "You all assumed I would." Madeline suddenly stepped closer, voice cracking. "Elena, please, we can fix this. Just call them. We'll make it right. You can come to the wedding. Sit wherever you want." Now it was my turn to laugh. Quiet, not cruel, just tired. Now I'm invited after all this. She blinked fast, mascara pooling under her eyes. "I didn't mean it the way it sounded. You meant every word I said. You wanted the money, not me." My father finally set down his hands, voice low. "Elena, enough. You've made your point." "Have I?" I asked. Because the point was never about the money. It was about respect. And apparently you all needed a financial disaster to notice the difference. Silence again, except for the sound of Madeline's soft sobs muffled behind her hands. Aaron looked at me. Really looked for the first time since we were kids. The realization on his face wasn't anger anymore. It was shame. He said quietly, "So, it's really over." I nodded. "For you, maybe. For me, it's just beginning." He opened his mouth like he might argue, then shut it again. The weight of his own silence seemed to press down harder than any words I could have thrown, when they finally left the door closed with a final heavy sound. I stood there for a moment staring at it, then turned back toward the window. Through the glass, I could see the gray skyline blurred by rain. Somewhere across town, 150 guests were probably checking their watches, wondering why the ceremony hadn't started. I poured myself another cup of coffee, steady hands this time, and sat on the couch, listening to the hum of quiet justice. My phone buzzed again and again, each vibration softer, more frantic, then finally, still. Later that night, I heard from Miles. "You good?" he asked over the phone. I looked around my apartment, clean, calm, peaceful. For the first time in a long time, I said, "Yeah, I am." The next morning, headlines in the local society pages read, "High-profile lake, wedding canceled, last-minute vendors blame miscommunication." But I knew better. It wasn't miscommunication, it was revelation. The kind that costs you everything fake and gives you back everything real. 3 months later, summer was already fading when the second wedding happened. Smaller, quieter, stripped of everything that used to scream perfection. Aaron and Madeline finally married in a local restaurant. No lake view, no string quartet, no curated floral arch. Just a few tables, a simple meal, and bills they paid themselves. I went, not out of obligation, but because the anger had cooled into something cleaner boundaries. They'd invited me properly this time, handwritten card and apology from Aaron tucked inside. "You were right. I should have stood up for you. It wasn't everything, but it was enough." When I walked in, heads turned. There was no tension, just acknowledgement. Madeline greeted me with a cautious smile, her voice softer, almost human. "Thank you for coming." I met her eyes. "Thank you for the invitation." That was all. No drama, no grand forgiveness, just adults standing in the wreckage of their own choices, learning to be decent again. After dinner, Aaron and I stepped outside for air. The night was warm, the kind of Seattle evening that still smelled faintly of rain. "I still can't believe you did it," he said, a hint of awe in his voice. "I didn't do anything I said. I just stopped." He nodded slowly, understanding, settling into his expression. It needed to happen. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It did." We didn't need to rehash the details. He'd learned the hard way that money doesn't buy loyalty, it exposes it. Later that week, I used part of the refunded deposits to take a solo trip to Italy. No schedules, no family obligations. Just me, my passport, and the kind of silence that finally felt earned. I spent mornings sipping espresso on quiet terraces, watching strangers laugh, realizing I didn't owe anyone a single explanation for my peace. When I got back, I moved my business to a smaller office closer to home. Miles teased me about early retirement, but really it was something else. I wasn't shrinking, I was choosing. For the first time, my life felt mine. Not borrowed, not bargained. Mine. If you've ever been the person holding everything together while everyone else tears you down, listen closely. Walking away isn't cruelty. It's clarity. So tell me, have you ever stopped fixing and finally started living? That day taught me something no textbook ever could love without respect is just manipulation dressed in family colors. You can give people everything, time, money, loyalty, and they'll still treat it like air until it's gone. So if you're watching this, wondering when it's okay to stop giving, this is your sign. Walk away. Let them face the silence they built. If this story hit close to home, tell me where you're listening from and what you'd have done in my place. Subscribe for more stories of betrayal, justice, and quiet strength.